So what's up, guys? And today I wanted to talk about sights. Now, I done a rundown on this last year on what sight would work best for you, and went through all the different versions of sights that they had, sliders and all that. And you can go back through if you want to see that to the later video and check that out. Today, I wanted to do a video on one pin versus multi-pin sights. So let's get into it. Now, before we really dive into this, I just want to say that a lot of this is opinion based. You know, there is from use of what I've calculated, what I've went through, the testing that I've done throughout my years hunting, using one pin and multi-pin sights. But with a one pin sight is awesome for shooting tournaments. If you get distracted by a bunch of pins setting up there like this, then you're probably going to want a one pin sight. You know, you get a one pin sight, all you're focusing on is that little pin right there. You're not focusing on a bunch of pins stacked up like this. So if you're starting out new to archery, or if you're shooting tournament archery, a one pin sight is the best for you. Now, with a one pin sight, you can only get, a con to that is you can only get one pin size. Now you can usually swap out your pins or whatever, but from a 10 thousandths, 15, 19 to a 29 thousandths, you can't go through like say on a multi-pin sight and have different, you know, configurations of fiber sizes. So whatever pin you get, you can always go out and switch it out, but you have to buy another set of pins for that. So it's not really a big hassle, but if you just want to test out different pins and stuff, you just have to go back through and buy another set. Now, in hunting situations with that, if you're hunting, and I've had deer in states that you can bait, if you got a direct corridor that's 20 yards, you got a fixed place that you know, hey, this deer's going to be out here and he's going to be standing at this general area and it's going to be this distance, and you got it ranged and you know that that deer's going to be there, then a one pin sight works great. Even if a deer is walking off a little bit, and you can sit there and aim, and he walks 5 yards and you can get top of his back, shoot off top of his back, whatever. But if he's got a fixed position, a fixed place that you can actually shoot him in, a one pin sight is great. Now, a con to that is, say you've got one of them split second decision kind of things. You only got one pin. So say if you got a deer and he's at 20 yards, he bumps, spook, does something, whatever. Even if you don't already have that ranged, you go up, you grab your rangefinder, then you got to dial your sight down to how far he is and then shoot. Or you range him, and throughout practice and repetition and knowing your gaps of your height and your raise on your arrow, then you can set the pin either above him, or if he runs closer, set it down lower on him. But you have to shoot to figure out them gaps in between whatever distance you are. So if that deer's 20 yards away and then he's walking and he's going to say 30, 40 yards, so he's walking from 20, he's at 30, you pick up your rangefinder, you range him, you're dialing your sight, and then you look and the deer's walked another 5 yards. So you either got to range ahead of him a good bit and then dial it, or now that you've already dialed it for 30 and he walked another 5 yards, then you got to do your raise. So that's just a little bit of a con, is in a lot of situations where you got moving animals, you have to range, you have to redial because you only have one pin. So that's versus a multi-pin sight that you don't have to worry about that. So that was just a little bit on a one pin sight that is a little bit of a con, and that's probably the biggest thing with a one pin sight that people have a problem with, is the fact that they have to make a split, you know, decision moment and split second moment decision, and you range it and that animal's still walking, and now you have to range it again and sit there and dial it down to get the yardage that you want. A lot of people can do it really quick. I've done it quicker before. Actually, the deer that I shot in Indiana, he come in, I had everything already pre-ranged. So once I had everything pre-ranged, he come up and I ranged a distance that was 30 yards. He was in a range distance that was 20 yards, and he was in between that 30 to 20 yard gap that I had ranged. And through practice, I knew where I needed to hold, and I put it at the top of his back and center punched him right in the center. My sight was at 20, and I put it at the top of his back, shot, center punched him in the center of his shoulder. He was 27 yards, 25 yards, run off and killed that deer. A con to that is I've also had moments to where through self-filming, the 8-pointer that I actually killed the first season of Yeet Missile, he was feeding between a branch at 45 like this, so I run my sight to 45 and went to shoot him. And right when I went to draw back, he moved to 40 yards, and I forgot to move my sight. And I just sat a pin on him and shot over his back. So I've had good and bad experiences with one pin sights, but it's if it works for you, if you can get a deer that's in a general area and you don't feel like it's going to be that big of a problem, then by all means go with a one pin sight. With a multi-pin sight, whenever you're in a multi-pin slider, what I really like about a multi-pin slider is that I got especially a 5-pin. They come in a different configurations: 5 pins, 3 pins, 2 pins. So whenever you go to shoot, you already have a set distance throughout a multiple set of pins that you can shoot a deer in. So if you got a deer that's 20, or you got a deer that's 20 to 30 yards in your shot distance, and you range it and say you're hunting, and you know that you have a shot distance from 20 to 40 within an area, you don't ever have to move your sight. You can just draw back and shoot that deer within the 20 to 40 yard range. The con to a multi-pin sight would be it is a little bit more time consuming setting up. So with like a one pin sight, whenever you go to set it up, you set your 20, your 40, your 60, and whatever distance, but usually from 20 to 60 is what they recommend. But I do my 20, I do my 40, my 60, and my 80, and my 100. So I get all those just to make sure. I'm OCD, but just to make sure that I get everything in dialed, I check all those ranges. With a multi-pin sight, if it's for sure a 5-pin that comes off to the side like this and not a 3-pin stack, you have to sight in your 20, 40, 60, 20 through 60, and then go back through and sight in your 5-pin. You sight in your mover, and then you got to sight in your 5-pin. Your other 4 pins for that. So it takes a little bit more time. If you get a 2-pin or a 3-pin, you won't have to worry about that. You just set your sight for the 1 pin you're going to use for your slider, whether it's your top or your bottom pin. And then I always like using my bottom pin for my distance carryover. So for my 20 to my 40, if I'm sliding it down going to 100 or 20 to 80. So if I'm sliding down, I'm going further distances, I'm going to use my bottom pin for my slider and then go off my other pins for that. But if you have a 3-pin or whatever, then you'll just set it up like a 1-pin and then shoot your 2 other pins and then see where they hit at. Usually they're within, I think most companies do them within a 10-yard variance. So you have a 3-pin, you set your slider to 40 yards, then 20 yards, whatever, then you're going to have a 10-yard increment in between each pin. So it's not that much of a hassle, but it is different than a 1-pin. The other thing that I will add to that is, like the 1-pin with stressful situations, you're in a complete different ball game with a multi-pin sight. So if you got a deer that I've had situations to where I've had a deer come out and he was 20, 30 yards, and then he kept walking, and I ranged him and I ranged ahead of him, and I think it ended up being 45 by the time that he got to where I ranged him. And I didn't have to roll my dial or nothing. I just ranged him. That was less movement. So instead of ranging and dialing and trying to get it perfect, I just ranged him. I already had a 40 and a 50 pin, so I knew through practice that I could just hold in between my 40 and my 50. And I drew back and just put my 40 and my 50, put him right in between it and shot, and I was good. So a multi-pin sight for situations if you're hunting the rut, you're elk hunting, you got fast-paced moving animals that change distance over a wide variety of time, over a short period of time, I mean, then a multi-pin sight is awesome because all you got to do is just range and go. Now, if he gets out to like 80 yards or something like that, then you can, then you have to dial your sight down. But again, with that, with practice and repetition, dial your sight down to them farther distances and start shooting walking in and check out what each of your other pins are doing going up. So you know in your ranges, if you got a deer that's 80 yards and he runs into 55, you know which pin to shoot him with. I mean, you got 4 other distances that you can shoot at that deer other than your 80-yard mark if he's running into you, and same for 20. So I really like one pin or multi-pin sights for that reason, because in fast-paced scenarios with animals changing distance, I can get on them and I don't have to worry about dialing my sight all the time. On to that, a multi-pin versus a single pin is, I don't know if it's just me or if other people have had this happen to them, but lighting. So whenever you get into lighting and you turn your sight light on, with a one pin sight, you flip that light on and it just illuminates as much or as little as you want to. I have noticed with a multi-pin sight, it is very hard to get 5 or 3 other pins to illuminate, especially with a 5-pin when it's stacked all the way down there. Even if the fibers are right there together and you got a light on there, you have to have a more powerful light to get the same results. And I've still found out that if I go to turn on my light for and raise my brightness up for my other pins, then my 20-yard pin, my top pin, might be glowing like crazy, and then my 50 or my 60 will be sitting there and it'll just be glowing just a little bit. So that's something to play around with, and I got to figure out on that. I don't know if it's got to do with something of the length of the fiber. The longer the fiber is, I'm assuming what's going on there is the longer the fiber is, that it takes more light to be able to penetrate through that length of fiber versus shorter fiber. So I like to play around with that and make sure that that's what's going on. Like I said, that's opinion based, but that is a problem that I have had with multi-pin sights versus a one-pin sight. It's not that big of a deal, but it makes it a little bit irritating when you're trying to focus on a bottom pin that's not lit up that much, and then you've got a dadgum shooting star blowing you back, blaring back in your face with your 20-yard pin. So there is your con with a multi-pin sight there. A lot of people get frustrated and confused looking at multiple pins coming at you like this or stacked up like this. A lot of people will want to try to focus on them other pins instead of one pin. So people that get frustrated about looking at multiple pins, or they feel like it's a lot in their sight housing. So I've had issues to where I've aimed at deer before with a multiple pin sight, and I lost a little bit of information on body-wise on the deer's front leg, back leg, what's it doing. So with a one pin sight, I was able to, with a straight up and down pin, I can see a lot more information about that deer's body. Again, it's not that big of an issue. Just go out and shoot it and see what works best for you. So there's a short rundown, guys. Hope that if you're deciding on a multi-pin or a one pin, that kind of helps. It wasn't a super long video, but just kind of wanted to give a rundown on pros and cons. What I have personally dealt with a one pin and a multiple pin sight. I personally am going to run a multiple pin sight slider. It's just a personal preference for the way and the style that I hunt. It works out best for me. One pin might work out best for you. So just go to your local bow shop, try them out, see what works out for you. I'll see you guys on the next one.